Hey everyone, welcome to Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. This podcast is all about farmers markets. Whether you're a farmers market manager or a small farmer, food maker, or artisan selling at farmers markets, you have found just the right podcast.
I'm Kat Fields-White.
And I'm Bridget Myers. We're longtime farmers market managers, educators, and consultants. This week, we're chatting with Melissa Siwiec, Executive Director of Lancaster Central Market Trust, about applying for grants for your farmers market. The FMPP grant season is underway, and the deadline is closer than you think.
Today's episode of Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast, is supported by Farmers Market University, offering a self-paced online market management 101 course for new market managers year-round, and live market management certification classes annually. Learn all the skills you'll need to manage a new market or improve your current market's operations and reduce your stress. Find more information about current course offerings by clicking the Farmers Market University logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Well, welcome back to Tent Talk today, everyone. Our guest is Melissa Siwiec. She's Executive Director of the Lancaster Central Market Trust and a seasoned nonprofit consultant. And we're going to talk about applying for grants for your farmers market. Dun, dun, dun. The USDA recently opened the request for proposal for farmers market promotion program grants, among others, and the deadline to submit is just 51 days away.
Start your engines.
You're welcome for calculating that for you. Set that timer. If you have not yet applied for your UEI, that's your unique entity identifier, do that right after you finish listening to this episode because those can take a little time to process.
Yeah, that will definitely hold you up if you get through the whole process and then realize, oh, I need a UEI. I'll just apply for that right now. Hold the phone, 4 to 6 weeks.
Wah, wah.
We met Melissa when Farmers Market Pros responded to a request for proposal for technical assistance in implementing the FMPP grant she obtained for the Lancaster Central Market in Lancaster, Pennsylvania in 2022. We've worked together on that grants project since then, and we're delighted to welcome her to Tent Talk today. Welcome, Melissa.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
So excited to talk to you. We always get lots of questions about these kinds of things from our listeners and folks that we talk to. And so I think this will be a really resourceful episode of Tent Talk. So if you want to just jump in and kind of tell us briefly about your personal and professional background and your personal experience with farmers markets.
Sure. So I have a long history in nonprofit management, working for really tiny nonprofit organizations to United Way's, like back when United Way was like the funder, back a long time ago. And I honestly had never worked for a farmer's market before. I had been, obviously a customer of farmers markets and in Lancaster, which is abundant with farmers and roadside stands. It was just part of how I provided food for my family. So, I saw the ad for the Lancaster Farmers Market, and I had been there many, many times, starting from when I was a little kid, and thought, wow, that's like the dream job because the market in Lancaster City is everything.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's a great old historic public market. It's amazing.
Lovely. Sounds so lovely. So your experience kind of translated into market leadership just because you were great at managing and had that nonprofit experience. Can you tell us a little bit about the Lancaster Central Market, maybe, and like its recent history, a little background on the market itself?
Sure. So the market was actually founded in 1730.
Wow.
And we are coming up on our 300th birthday in 2030. So that's going to be a pretty big celebration. And it was started because we're close to Philadelphia. And, at the time when horse and buggy was your way of traveling, it was a good stopping point to rest and get provisions. And they started this farmers market in the center of the city. And it has been there ever since. Like everything was built around this market. And it was maybe an open air market for 160 years. And then in 1889, they built the building that we're still in and operate from. And so, that has its own birthday. And we transitioned from an open air market to an indoor market. We operate year long, 3 days a week. Our schedule is kind of based on the philosophy that our farmers need time to farm. So we're open Tuesday, Friday, and Saturday from 6 to 3 every week.
6 to 3. Wow. That's great. Oh, that's so nice. We need one of those here in San Diego. So it sounds like that has a long, well-established history, and then you came in and played a role there at the Lancaster Central Market. What does Executive Director's Day at a very well-established public market look like, and how do you think that's evolving?
Well, before I started, I thought, well, I'll be involved like actually in the market. And there were some things that, I get involved in. But for the most part, my job was to secure funding and to really implement the strategic plan that the board had been very thoughtful about. They had never had an executive director before. They received all of their operational funding from the standholder fees that they, pay for rent and electricity. And the strategic plan really called for them to take a look at how we feed the community, not just from inside the market, but what can we do outside the market walls? So they really wanted to do a lot of outreach and get involved more in food insecurity in the county. So my job was really to create partnerships, get funding, and implement the programs that came from the strategic plan.
So they had already looked at kind of outreach, and I'm assuming that they knew that they couldn't really fund that from stallholder fees, right?
No, in fact, they didn't want to do it on the backs of the standholders. I mean, already they're trying to run a small business, and while they'll benefit from the programs that we implement in the community, they shouldn't have to pay for it. It's a community benefit program for the most part. They're looking at online ordering, mobile markets, we thought about delivery, and really kind of filling gaps, trying to help, sign up more people for SNAP and make sure that more people are taking advantage of WIC and the farmers market nutrition program.
Melissa, when did you start at Lancaster relative to when you applied for the FMPP grant? Pretty good. It was a pretty short window, right?
It was pretty much a whirlwind. So I started in March of 2022 and didn't actually learn about the FMPP grant until April. So that gave me a hot month after I had been there, only for a month, to figure out how to apply for it. And that's really where my experience kind of took over, because I've applied for a lot of federal grants. But I also needed to build the infrastructure for the farmers market to be able to accept federal funds, because they had never gotten any grants before. So heck, why not? Let's start with a federal one.
Jump right in. And you did a good job. So the USDA fiscal year 24 Farmers Market Promotion Program applications are due May 14th. I think they were due even earlier the year that you did it. And they always say at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time, and they're serious about that. You cannot submit it at 11:59.30
No late
seconds. Yeah. And that's just as many seasonal markets are opening for their seasons. It's year-round markets are kind of ramping up for pink growing season. Texas and Arizona, we know your schedules may vary. This may not relate as much to you, but for most folks, it's such a busy season already. So we're hoping you can give our listeners some tips on what it takes to get prepared for applying for a grant. I would say the first tip is do not, as Melissa had to, and just from where she was, do not start on April 1st. Start now. Right, as soon as we get off this episode, start now. So what kind of projects do FMPP grants cover, Melissa? How would you decide on that versus another one of the LAMP grants?
Yeah, when I was looking at their the RFPs, they talked about capacity building for farmers not just for farmers markets, but for organizations that would be applicable for the grant. And we had just gone through this rigorous strategic planning process, so that was a good fit for us. But I understand that you can also use it for training and recruitment. You can use it for marketing and other community training in food systems.
So that made FMPP make sense for your project since you already had a project going. So, I mean, one of our questions is always what comes first, the chicken or the egg? Do you identify a goal in a project and then look for applicable funding? Or do you look for what's out there in terms of money and then choose a project that fits that or a goal that fits that? It sounds like, though, you had your goals pretty much lined up already.
We did. And I would say that that's the best practice. When you look for funding and then try to figure out a program to match the funding, you're really just chasing money, and that's not sustainable. It's not a good idea. You should have a plan, a goal, know what you want to do, and then look for the funding sources that will help you implement that program.
So what we need for folks looking at FMPP grants now that haven't done that before is a time machine to go back and do a strategic plan, right? They need to back up a little bit.
Yeah, but I mean, my guess is that even in the absence of a strategic plan, a market manager will know what makes sense in the community. And in my experience, most of the time, strategic plans are really just an affirmation of what the leader knows needs to happen. So if you've got that clear in your head, the absence of a strategic plan isn't all that, terrible. You can still apply for a grant that fits that work that needs to happen and help you implement that, or even brainstorm, how that will look. Because, we just had ideas about increasing our service capacity and making sure that more entrepreneurs had access to, the business at market, but we didn't know exactly how that was going to look. So we wrote the grant to give us the opportunity to figure that out and to build our capacity to be able to implement it.
Yeah, and FMPP, I think, among some other programs at USDA, they have sort of two levels. You can apply for a grant to plan things, and then you can apply for a grant to do things. So sometimes that exploration can fall under grant funding, right?
Absolutely. And it's such a blessing to have that process underwritten, because you can bring in a consultant, you can include in the budget staff time to think. Like that's just unheard of in most nonprofits, and especially a farmer's market, because, people on the ground are moving all the time.
Right. So if you've got a wish list in your head, I wish we could add this program, this will give you a little time to step back and explore that. How much time should folks expect to spend on an application for an FMPP grant?
The entire time.
Yeah.
I mean, because I started so late, that's all I did for a month. I mean, the standholders were like, wait, didn't we hire an executive director? I don't see her anymore, because I was writing the grant. So I kind of had to do a reintroduction of myself after I finally submitted it. But yeah, there is a definite process to this. And I would say start with downloading the RFP. Print it, like for real, print it, highlight it, put little sticky notes on it so you can remember the important parts. It is your guide to what they're looking for. The federal government is really good at laying all of that out for you. There really aren't a lot of questions. They even put definitions, because, definitions for the government mean something different than what it means for us. And then you need to spend time registering for, 3 different, the UEI number, SAMS.gov, and then grants.gov. And then you need to create your grant space where you actually select the grant and write the narrative. I would recommend that you write the narrative, like you download the entire application and then write the narrative in Word or whatever word processing program you use, so that you can edit it. Don't write it in grants.gov, because you could lose it and then you would cry for days, and that's a terrible feeling. And then you've got to have time to create your budget, the budget narrative, which always needs to accompany your budget, kind of telling them why you need the funds that are built in your budget. You need time to proof it, and then you need time to format it, because they want it in their format, and they want to, even your letters have to be their template. So that that I felt like took more time than I had anticipated.
Yeah, I remember that just because we've been, as Farmers Market Pros, we come in a lot of times as a technical advisor for grants. And sometimes that means that we're providing some of the matching funds or matching, we work with some farmers market associations where they get a match by us providing registration for the conference online, that kind of thing. And I remember that those letters, it's like, put this on your letterhead, but not really. Put this on your letterhead, but using this very specific template with this font and this type size and fitting into these margins. And if you don't do that, they'll toss them.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like following instructions it is a large part of whether or not you get funded.
Yeah, that's wild. So when you talk about doing budgets, and I'm sure that they have to fit also into a very specific format, what kind of skills are required for that? Do you need to bring an accountant or a financial expert in while you're writing your grant?
I mean, if you're not savvy with that process, then yes, you might want to have a consultant or even, a bookkeeper or somebody who's familiar with grants to help you out with that process. But they have a format that they want you to include, which includes the personnel that you want, what percentage of time you want them to be involved in the grant. What is your fringe calculation then for each of those positions? There's equipment, supplies, consultants, and then this nebulous category called other that you put other things that don't fit into one of those other categories. And for us, we put things like software and marketing, our website. Yeah, those are the things that kind of fit in there.
So you can include contracts with a technical advisor, consultant, that kind of thing in your budget. So that gets covered.
Yes. Yeah. So we had a healthy budget for a consultant to help us. In my experience, if you already have a job, creating a program is not always, the time is not always available to you. So it's definitely a smart move to include funds for a consultant to help you figure out like what are best practices, what's the feasibility of this project, how do we actually pay for it, after we implement it.
Yeah.
So we built in that, and then also money to help a marketing professional help us be more mature. Like we had just started fundraising, and we needed our fundraising and our program marketing to kind of be married. And this marketing professional helped us figure out like what's a good tagline for all of that. Good Things Grow at Market was what they came up with. It was really cute. And, it will help us talk about that in terms of fundraising, growing our resources, and growing the products that we have at market. Yeah,
I love it. That's a good tagline. Is hiring a grant writer a good investment? You can't add those fees to the grant budget, right?
You can't. You can't include anything that is prior to the grant period. So the funding period. So you can't go back in time and say, well, I hired a grant writer and I want you to reimburse me for that now. So that is on your dime. And I would say, yes, it's a really good investment if you're not comfortable writing grants. If this is your first one, you need somebody to walk with you, to help you figure out, because there are some questions that unless you've been doing this for a while, you don't actually know what they're asking for. Like there's like a language to grant questions.
Right. Yeah, I think so too. And we have seen organizations that maybe got a sponsor to contribute to their operations budget, which includes hiring a grant writer. So you could get it from somewhere else, but you can't, obviously can't get it reimbursed from that grant.
Correct.
So as with your grant, 25% match is still required in FMPP proposals. They do have a variation, kind of a fast track grant, which does not look very fast tracking to me, but it's a little bit less complicated than a full on FMPP grant, and that has a little bit different match level. But for a regular FMPP grant, there's a 25% match required. So how challenging was it to find those funds? Is that something you can self-fund? Does it have to come from other sources?
No, it doesn't have to come from other sources. And so finding that 25% isn't as hard as it seems. It's not like you have to raise, you have to go write another grant for your indirect costs. It should, in a perfect world, be built into expenses that you already have as an organization. So for us, we've built in a certain percentage of staff time into the actual grant and then used part of that as match. You're already paying those salaries. So if you can say, somebody's going to spend 10% of their time on this grant, use that as match. The other thing that is really kind of convenient in federal grants is the indirect cost. So you take all of your grant expenses, you multiply that by, I forget what the percentage is, it's like 10% maybe, and that can all be matched. And really the idea behind that is you might have an executive director, or you have to pay a bookkeeper, or, you have a building that you have to work from, or computers. And it is kind of all of those admin expenses on the top of your expenses, because you always have those fees and things that you need to pay for anyway. So that indirect, for us, that was a big majority of our match.
Got it. Yeah. We actually had a session at the conference last month with Ben Feldman, who has a consulting company now specifically dealing with indirect costs. I mean, it's that niche because he says, that's a lot of times what gets left on the table in the budget because you don't know how to write the reimbursement request for that. So any other big challenges before we get to what happens after you get the grant? Any other big challenges in writing an FMPP grant, or in maybe a pro tip or two for someone looking at doing that for the first time?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first pro tip is follow the instructions to the T. Like if you are, having a match letter or a partnership letter, make sure that it's in their format. If it tells you that you need to use their specific website that outlines where food insecurity is in your community, use that. We had other resources that told us differently, but they want our grant application to match where they are showing pockets of low income or low access. So use those tools. I think the other thing is use data to support your narrative. You're going to have to do a little bit of research to demonstrate that the program that you are proposing, or whatever service you need for your farmers market, is actually needed. So that data can come from other outside sources. It can, be a report that's in your community. It can be another organization's annual report that says, oh, hey, this gap is identified here in our community. It can be a survey that you do with your standholders. It can be a customer-based survey. Just something that says, besides my opinion, here are other people that vet that this is an idea that we actually need in our community to make things work or to make things more equitable.
Yes, they want that data.
Yes. Oh, yeah. That's big. That's a big to do for a lot of us, but it's so helpful. And if you collect it ahead of time, it can be used for these projects and grants that you're going to go down the line. So how long does it take to find out if you've received a grant award? Like, how long is that waiting period?
It was pretty long. You just kind of have to go do other things for a long time and not perseverate on whether or not you got the grant because they go through their whole review process, and then there's a peer review process. So that just takes considerable time. I don't think that we knew that we were even in the running. So you submitted in May until maybe August. We started to hear back from USDA, and it was things that needed to be fixed. So I think that's another pro tip. It doesn't have to be perfect when you submit it. They will make sure, if you are a contender for the funding, that you fix your budget and you fix your narrative so that there won't be anything later that kicks you out of the running.
Oh, that's good to know.
Or a mistake later.
Mm-hmm. That's good to know. So they give you that feedback.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So we went through maybe a month of revisions, and then finally heard it was after they said we were going to hear. It was supposed to be the end of September, and I don't think we heard until October.
Yeah, I think there was
sometime late October.
Some kind of budget shutdown action in there where they sort of paused everything. I remember a lot of people being stressed out last fall about that. Yeah.
Wow. It's like a hurry up and wait. 11:59 p.m. and then wait a long time.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, it's good that they're doing their due diligence and processing everyone's applications. So then once you've been awarded a grant, what are the next steps? Once they tell you, it went through for you, what happens after that?
Then you get dumped into another grant program called Grant Solutions. And that's where you sign your final agreement with them. And pretty much, and then they do have some training. For us, it was online. And I don't think that they're planning on doing in-person training for a couple of years from now. So you get your kind of online training that's supposed to tell you like how you submit your reimbursement, what your reporting looks like. And luckily the reporting requirements for this are not that strenuous. It's like one annual report. And then I think a final report that you do. So they go over how you access all of those and how you get your reimbursement. And then it's your job to go implement it. So, you put out your RFPs for your consultants and you do your surveys, all of the things that you need to do.
Yeah. So what are those steps that you take to put together your implementation team once you're ready to implement these things?
Well, they ask for all of that in your narrative. So you have to identify, like who is your the main person overseeing it and who is your project manager and who, what person is going to take care of what task. So it's already, the plan is already pretty much laid out for you. It's then your job to go ahead and implement it. If you have changes from that, people move on or, for us, because I had been there for a month before I started to write the grant, boy, did I learn a whole lot later about how we really operated. I was making up stuff on the fly. Like, not that I lied, but I was like having to fill in gaps that I didn't have. And so later on, we had to do a budget revision to actually match what the operations truly looked like so that we could get reimbursed for things that we were doing that counted towards the grant.
Oh, yeah. I would think that probably happens more often than you might think, like personnel changes or someone who came on board recently, but then is learning more along the way. Or if something happens, changes with the market, you move locations or you're able to expand or things like that. So budget number changes. But that's good to hear that you can kind of make those adjustments.
How often are you allowed to do budget revisions in the process?
I don't think that they have a rule about how often, but we wanted to be very judicious with that request because that also took some time for our program officer to be able to kind of get that into her work queue and really spend the time to review what our changes were. So I would recommend as a best practice, really only try to do it once.
Great.
Yeah.
Because you can go back in time and bill for things. Like we were finished with year one of the grant by the time we did our budget revision. And now, because all of that's been approved, we can go back in time and rebill for things that we missed.
Got it.
Oh,
well, that's good to know. I think people are really frightened about that. It's like, once we commit to this, we're really going to have to figure out how to make this work line by line here. But yeah, it's good to hear that there's some ability to revise.
Yeah, a little bit of adjustment there.
I mean, the people at USDA, they're human beings trying to do their job. And they want you to be successful. So I would say that this is another pro tip. Don't be intimidated by the fact that you're talking to a federal employee. They want you to be successful within the confines of the grant. So use them as a valuable resource and make them your friend. Yeah. Kind of like, the health inspector. Don't be frightened by that. Just embrace them and follow the rules and it'll be all good.
That's true.
That's good advice. That's really good advice because I think some folks, that is what maybe stops them from even thinking about attempting a grant or, dealing with any federal agency that we have to deal with just because it seems intimidating. But yeah, you're right. I think a lot of them are really helpful. They really want you to succeed and, we should be using this funding. So it's worth it. Who do you think should be or who does keep track of the grant fund reporting? Because I know that's a big job. So who's doing that kind of thing when you get these grants?
We had to kind of build our capacity in that way. So we had to get a time tracking software because everybody then who was written into the grant had to keep track of their time so we could go and back and bill for that time that they were actually working on the grant. And you have to be able to prove it. You can't just say, oh, well, I think it was, 10%, maybe. No, like you have to demonstrate that in case you ever get audited by USDA. So we used TechSoup and got a program called QuickTime. And it's really, really cheap. I think it's like $10 per user per month, free for the first year, but then $10 per person per month after the first year. And it allows you to put in different funding sources and activities for that, for those programs, so that you can not only track how much time, but what were people doing. So we had to do that. And we also had to put our grant into QuickBooks so that we could track the expenses related to the grant. And so it wasn't so burdensome for our bookkeeper to go back and be able to do that financial reporting. On the program side, your project manager should be tracking what you're doing to actually achieve the long-term goals. So for us, it was, this first year was creating partnerships with other nonprofits in the Lancaster area, surveying our standholders, surveying our customers, doing we call it a rapid market assessment, which means how many people are coming into the market and what are they buying? Like what's the commerce really happening in our market? And actually, we were able to write in Placer AI into our grant. So we're going to have like all of this amazing data about who's visiting and where are they going afterwards and who are our competitors. So if for nothing else, the USDA grant has been really valuable for collecting data. So like somebody just needs to be keeping track of all of those things, because the year-end report asks you, well, what did you do to actually achieve your goal? And it doesn't mean that you have to you don't have to have a deliverable every year, but you have to be able to show that incrementally you're getting there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, and having to track everything sounds like a lot of work. And I think that's also kind of daunting to everybody. But it's good that there's these tools kind of available, and having time tracking software sounds like a good way to track all of that. With the funding, how long does it typically take to receive the funds? Or do you spend the money first and then get reimbursed? Or do you have a pool of funds to draw from?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think some people think, oh, I'm going to get a check for $250,000. And no, You're not. You're going to get reimbursed for your expenses after the fact. So you need to be able to have enough reserves or cash in hand to pay for all of those services and then get reimbursed. But the good news is it's a really quick turnaround time. I mean, you put in your request for reimbursement and you typically have it in 7 to 10 days. So it's maybe even in a shorter time, because it's all done online.
And how often can you ask for reimbursement?
I think monthly.
Okay.
Oh,
great.
Yeah. I mean, we do it quarterly just because that's what we're doing. But
yeah. I mean, I would think inputting all that information also takes time. And so if you can kind of write it out quarterly or a little bit longer, that'd probably be easier just for time's sake if you're entering in information that you need to get reimbursed. But it's good to know, if you need it month to month, that's there for you as well. So
I do think a lot of people envision that somebody's going to send them a $459,000 check.
And, would be lovely.
Which would be lovely, wouldn't it? But that's not how the federal grants work.
I'm pretty sure they're not
Maybe
that trusting.
Maybe you get a private foundation.
Yeah. That trust piece is missing. So is there anything you've learned from the experience of receiving a grant that you think would be important for other applicants to know?
Yeah, what haven't we asked that we should have?
I think that for me, the partnership piece was a bit of a surprise. You need to have that built into your narrative. And obviously, since I had only been there for a month, I didn't have those partnerships created. So if you already have a coalition that you're working with or other organizations, really like your anchor standholders, they can be your partners too, to write letters of support or to even provide staff time that might be a match. And those partners can be fluid. We didn't even realize that there was an organization in our community that was studying food insecurity. And now, that group and a couple of nonprofits that I didn't even think were, kind of in the game with me are now my partners. So I would just expect that that's fluid. It can change. And also it's something that you should always be thinking about when you're going to apply for one of these grants.
Yeah, it really makes sense. I mean, so FMPP puts a lot of emphasis on partnerships, right? I mean, is that a requirement for the grant or just something that's encouraged? Yes. Or it isn't a requirement? They want to know that you're working with other folks.
Right. Yeah. That you don't want to be a siloed organization or the sin is to create a program that's already in the community. Like, don't do that. Partner with somebody else.
Yeah, makes complete sense. And obviously you're going to accomplish more if you do that as well. So you're coming into the last year of the grant? Is it a 3-year grant?
Yeah, so we're like right in the middle of it, I guess. And in October will be the beginning of our 3rd year.
Got it. So and if I remember correctly, your first 2 years are planning and exploring and research, and then it's really your 3rd year where you start putting things on the street and taking those orders and things, right? Yeah, so that's coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been really...
We gave ourselves a long runway to figure out what we wanted to do, study it, to make sure that it was going to be financially a good idea and not sink us.
Right.
And, we want to know the community is going to support it. And then we'll go ahead and implement some pilots in year 3.
Great. Oh, you're making great progress. So what's next for you, Melissa?
Well, in the middle of all of this, I relocated from Lancaster to New Orleans. Because I don't know, I'm crazy and I needed an adventure. So I'm going to hand the baton to our new executive director in April, and then we'll see what my adventure will be down here. But I'm considering maybe doing a consulting business. Just depends.
Can you consult with people that have gotten grants?
It
sounds like you got a lot of expertise there, and I think that could be really helpful for a lot of people in this situation. Will you consult with Lancaster, do you think? Do you think you're going to stay in touch with them as they go forward with the grant, or kind of depends on who comes in that is familiar?
Yeah. I think it depends on the new executive director's appetite for having me hanging around. I totally get it that, she may want to kind of establish herself without me looking over her shoulder saying, "What are you doing?" I wouldn't do it that way.
You just be a quiet answerer of questions behind the scenes. That could be good. And it's because you're sensitive to that, that's likely what will happen. Well, it's been really a pleasure talking to you. I think your information and insights are going to be extremely helpful to our listeners.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, people can feel free to reach out to me if they've got questions or, they want to they want to talk about, grant writing or even a contract. I'd be happy to do that with them.
Perfect. We'll make sure and get that contact information into the show notes on this. And you may be hearing from folks tackling the big FMPP hill this next 51 days.
You can do it.
Yeah. Good luck to everyone.
Thanks. Remember, as Ben Feldman reminded us at the conference last month, there's a lot of people out there getting federal grants. All kinds of people doing all kinds of things. And a good reminder from him was that people in food service and farmers markets are doing good for the world, and we deserve to use those federal funds. The things we do actually benefit the citizens of the U.S. Oddly, only 18 to 30% of available farmers market promotion program grants are ever awarded. That means there's a lot of folks not applying to take advantage of money that's already been laid on the table for us to pick up. Don't leave your money on the table. Go register for your UEI, look more closely at the projects that you've been wishing you had money to implement, and move forward. Thanks for listening today, and big thanks to Farmers Market University for helping market managers hone and verify their professional skills, and for supporting Tent Talk, the Farmers Market podcast. Learn more about their current training and certification programs by clicking the Farmers Market University logo on the resource page at farmersmarketpros.com.
Thanks for listening to Tent Talk today. Please leave us a review on your podcast app or wherever you listen to Tent Talk. Let us and others know how you're enjoying the podcast. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode of Tent Talk. Connect with fellow Farmers Market folks in our private Facebook group, the Farmers Market Pros Community, and follow us on Instagram at Farmers Market Pros. Find online education and other resources at farmersmarketpros.com. Tent Talk is brought to you by Farmers Market Pros, where passion meets profit. Tent Talk is hosted by Kat Fields White and Bridget Myers and produced by Leandra Hayes, with original music by David Mead. Tune in next week for another great episode.